ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the sixth session of the Happy Event Planner. This is me, Oliver, the community manager. Most of you will have heard of me before, and I'm really happy to welcome you guys. This is a super special session, not only because I'm not, as usual, streaming from the office in Berlin, Sweap. I'm on the other side of Europe at the moment, which makes this exciting for myself. And it's also an exciting session because we have a fantastic topic coming up today, event data, something that I think is relevant for everyone I've seen on the guest list. So really, really, really excited to have. I would like to just start by introducing our guests that we have today. We have two. One of them you will all know already, or at least everyone who's visited one of our sessions in the past. And we have another lovely guest coming in. So let me just pop them over here, and here we go. We have Florian and Chloe here today. Guys, fantastic. Lovely to have you. Really, really, really excited. Maybe ladies first. Chloe, could you introduce yourself and to our community?
Yes, absolutely. So hello, everybody. My name's Chloe Richardson, and I am VP Senior Corporate Relations with Explori, who are a research and insights company dedicated to the event space. And also, my other job is I run a community called ELX, which is the Event Leaders Exchange, where we bring together the heads of events from a variety of kind of Fortune 100 organizations to talk about driving positive industry change. And I would actually just like to add that I'm wearing the same color as the Happy Event Planner branding today to really represent whilst I join you on the podcast. So thank you so much for having me.
We're very grateful. Thank you, Chloe. That's fantastic. Florian, most of us know you, but maybe nevertheless, give us a little introduction. Who are you? I think you're still muted, Flo. You might want to unmute yourself.
Well, you have to have that classic thing at least at once in a meeting, right? Happy to be here. Thank you so much, Oliver, for the introduction. Chloe, it's a pleasure. Florian, CEO, founder of Sweap, trying to help companies to turn events into the most impactful marketing channel. And I think this is the potential that we're talking about for the future. And data is one of the key elements of this. So I'm super pumped about this session. I'm really looking forward to hear all the points from Chloe. I know it's going to be awesome. So let's start.
Fantastic. Just before we start, quick mention to everyone who's new. We do have a community, the Happy Event Planner Slack community. If you're interested to join, network with the others, find out first about these events and enjoy exclusive content, you've got the banner just under this live stream. One click and you're in the community. Fantastic. So, guys, event data. Flo, you already mentioned it. It's a very, very, very essential topic and something we really need to speak about more and more. Why is that, Flo? Why is event data so essential?
Oh, well, there are so many points. I think most of it comes from it's relevant for growing our businesses, right? It's the one thing that helps us to connect to our audience, to connect with people. And like we all know that people want to buy from people want to join people in communities, and event is the perfect platform for this. And if it comes to measuring the success of an event, like there is this part that is gut feeling, but all the other stuff is based on data. So if you want to know, do I make an impact with my event on the business, on the people, on my attendees, and the community? You have to measure it in some way, and this is where data comes in place.
Chloe, why is event data so essential?
Well, of course, everything Flo just said there is absolutely correct. The one thing I do want to stress, though, before we start talking about it at all, is I think over the last 2 years, we have, to a certain degree, started to really appreciate and understand why data is important. We know we absolutely have to demonstrate the impact and value that events programs bring to our organizations. And the only way to do that is to use robust, tangible metrics. But that's really, for me, the more important word is metric, because we now have so much data at our fingertips. We actually don't know what to do with it. And that for me is the biggest industry worry is, oh my goodness, we have a tsunami of data. It's washing over us. And yet we don't know how to interpret that data and use it to make these strategic data-driven decisions. And so that for me is kind of the missing link that we've currently got throughout the industry, whether you're an expo organizer or a corporate event planner. It's what do we now do with all this data we've collected and how can we use it effectively? And I think that's why data is important, and collecting the right data is probably the most important thing.
Perfect, thank you. Chloe, staying with you, how important is it to set goals before an event, and which goals should be set to then be able to interpret the data, as you already mentioned?
So the most important goal to set is actually to work with the rest of the business to define what that objective is. What is the point of this event? Are you doing it for thought leadership? Are you doing it for brand recognition? Are you doing it to increase your customer database? Are you doing it to decrease employee churn if it's an internal event? You need to work with other stakeholders in the business to sit down and say, look, what to you is a successful event? How can our events support wider business objectives? Before you start doing anything, before you do any event design, any event strategy, you need to make sure that your event has its place within the wider business objectives. And so once you've sat down with your organization and you've said, okay, these are the things that matter to the business. It's about growth. It's about brand recognition. It's about increased brand loyalty. Once you can really define those key larger objectives, you can say, okay, how does our event fit into that? What can we do at our event to really enhance and leverage those objectives for a better event and for long-term, a more successful business strategy? So I think it's about making sure that your objectives match your business objectives, which are different for everybody. And it's also, a lot of us skip this step because you don't see the importance of it before you've actually run your event. And it's only retrospectively you think, oh my goodness, actually, have we achieved what we were supposed to achieve? What were we even looking to achieve? And it's because they haven't set those objectives in advance. So you just need to sit down and understand, how does our event program fit into the bigger picture? And how can we really support our overall business objectives with our event? And that's really, for me, the key part.
I know this is something Flor will have something to add, because the impact of events on the business goals, we've heard it a few times, but we can't stress it enough, right, Flor?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's not many things to add because that was on point. And I think I like, now the ball is going back to Chloe again, because I think that is connected to a certain fear that I know you have, Chloe, regarding the future of our industry, the future of event and marketing teams in business and corporations. Because if we are not tracking the data, if we not think about how do we impact the business in the future, what happens next if we're really facing a depression, and if we really like going into this down phase, and like everybody needs to save on budget and all that stuff. So I bring that back to you because I know this is so close to your heart, but I think it is really important to talk about.
Yeah, no, it is. And thank you. So I would implore everyone on the call with us today to put themselves in the shoes of somebody who's responsible for the overall organizational budget. And let's say you are presented by various different departments, kind of key metrics, key data. You can see how that money's being spent and how that spend is turning into more customers, for example, or how that spend is turning into increased loyalty to the brand. And yet, if you approach an events department who doesn't have those tangible metrics and that tangible data, but yet it's just telling you, oh no, but it feels really good, like our attendees are super happy. As a logical individual that is controlling the purse strings of an organization, it's low-hanging fruit, because you are immediately, if you have to reduce budgets, you're going to cut the budgets of the departments you don't understand. And you don't understand them because they don't have the robust science in place to measure that impact and that value. And my real genuine concern with our industry, which I've been a part of ever since I turned 18, I absolutely love it. I think events are critical to society, to the world, to business. And yet, if we don't learn how to justify scientifically the impact and value that we bring our organizations, let me tell you, we are the low-hanging fruit. We will be the first budgets to be cut. We will be the first department to be sliced. We will be the first team to be taken out and brought outside or outsourced. And looking down the future, and you're right, we are approaching a recession. We know that it's going to be worldwide. It's not going to be a surprise to any of us, but it's still going to be really difficult. And we're competing against marketing channels that track their data. We're competing against online channels that are doing exactly what we have always struggled to do as an entire industry. And my biggest fear is that if we don't find a way to convince our stakeholders, our C-suite, our management, that we are absolutely indispensable for the business, we will be the first ones to be cut and we will become redundant as an industry. And I do not want to see that, because I think we're so critical. We just need to be better at explaining that properly, using the right metrics and the right measurement and performance tools. Yes, I am passionate about it. You're right.
We saw that. We saw
there
that.
you go. We can make a point here, and this was the most important message of the whole call, I promise, because this is really a thing that like perfect.
Yeah.
Chloe, so on point.
I'm glad we started with the Armageddon scenario, to be very honest, because now we can start rebuilding. But no, I fully agree. I mean, events, for me, it's very clear that they are becoming the most important marketing channel. But as every marketing channel, traditional ones and new ones, it needs to be proven at some point. I mean, marketing's always traditionally been in this difficult position of being seen as, not, I wouldn't say obsolete, but like, oh yeah, the guys from marketing, and where are the numbers? Well, how can we see the impact marketing is making? So the whole idea of marketing already is in this like stressed situation of having to prove again and again. And as both of you mentioned totally correctly, I mean, events are luckily not as difficult to prove as in the past that they have an impact, because we have the metrics, we have the software, we have the technology, but still it's not as easy as a campaign that we send online over social media, and then you see exactly how many clicks, how many people converted, etc. It's a bit more tricky. So maybe let's start looking a bit into like the practical side of event data. We know now it's essential for everyone who's listening, and also everyone who's not listening but in event marketing, that we need to prove it in future. Let's talk a bit about accountability at this point. So the session here is named the golden ticket for marketing and sales, and there's a very specific reason. There's why we chose to call it this, and it's mainly because we see a huge black hole in this world of how sales can actually profit from events that are held by marketing. But there's a long way to go from the event happening to someone actually converting in the sales world. So my question to both of you, what advice can you give basically both teams, but also management, CFO, etc., on how to get these two departments on the table and really profit from events?
You go first.
So do you want to go first? Or? Okay, I will. Fine, that works for me. So I think with sales and marketing, and I've worked with sales and marketing and in sales and marketing throughout my career, so I understand that there is not always synergy, because it's that kind of lead generation versus that thought leadership, placement and brand recognition. But again, it goes back to that thing that we touched on right at the beginning. It's about, if every department genuinely has the wider business objectives at the heart of everything they do, and if every department really puts their customer and their attendees at the heart of all the decisions that they make, then really everyone is on the same road. And so it becomes a byproduct that they start working together. So it's much easier to have these business conversations, because actually we are all, as two teams, working as one team towards a common goal. So that's really important. But I think the other thing to really bear in mind, if you are somebody who kind of is looking after sales and marketing teams, is that you need to find a way that your teams can also come together through the events department to drive growth, revenue, and other things that are important, other key metrics. So NPS, customer satisfaction, that kind of thing. We can't always determine impact by the amount of revenue generated or attendee numbers, because that doesn't actually tell us what those people are intending to do after they leave the show. That doesn't tell us, and it's exactly like you said there, Oliver, like sometimes people will come to an event and 2 years later they'll sign a deal, and they only did that because they attended the event 2 years prior, but you don't have that joined up kind of journey in place. So you need to make sure all your tech is integrated, everyone is singing the same tune, and again, everyone is speaking to those key core business driven objectives.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chloe. Flo, what's your opinion on this?
My opinion on this is like the first thing that needs to be done is like you have to broaden the perspective of like what can we measure actually, because what I see, and I mean it sounds weird from a position of being a CEO who only cares about revenue at the end of the day, is like setting only revenue related goals to events is a stupid thing to do, because there's so much more thing that can be impacted that like kind of like have an influence on growth, on topics and marketing and something like that. And like if we only like measure of how many attendees, how many leads we generated, how's pipeline growth, and are we even able to connect the data points, because I do an event today and then we close a deal in 12 months. So like what was the impact of the event 12 months ago on the actual sale? And these kind of thing is like if we only focus on revenue goals, we miss a mark here on showing the impact of events, right? So broaden the perspective really helps to understand or to align marketing and sales. So why are we running events? And I'm coming back to measuring it. Like it really that there needs to be a commitment to say, hey, it's okay that the event team like really stands for certain goals and stands for an impact and is owning the numbers. Because what I see is you do an event, you have great content after the event that you can publish. You have people that like on site, you have people who watch the content on demand. So if you only measure attendance rate, impact on revenue, what you don't see is that there might be thousands of people interacting, engaging with the content you just created through the event. So if the event team is not owning part of the success story, that's saying, hey, we created this content, and this content like down the road 12 months from now created so many views and we influenced XYZ with the content. If that is owned by the content team, so what does the event team then do? Because, well, yeah, 12 months ago we did the event, we generated 200 leads, and like 10 of them converted to a customer is like 10% of the story. And for me, align around the objective that we have in a company, but also broaden the perspective for all the teams, like teaching sales team that, hey, we don't do event only for generating leads. There are so many more things that we try to achieve. And then do the same with the marketing team. Teach the marketing team, hey, you have to connect to the sales team and you have to like be with them post-event, help them to engage with the audience, help them to drive them down the funnel. And then if you have this alignment and you bring it back to, hey, this is a combined initiative, then you actually like make the points here.
Mm-hmm. What role does sorry, Chloe, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, Flo. I think it is really important that we look at data silos, because we talk about it all the time, but actually it is one of the most common pitfalls for event planners, is actually having those data silos that don't allow you to make that joined up approach. And many of the people watching, I'm sure, will work for medium to large organizations with various departments and partners, whether it's marketing, sales or content, whoever it might be. And this causes a really immediate pitfall, as all the data they're collecting sits in silo, and it can really be a challenge to put together to make that coherent joined up story where you really understand your attendees. So I think it's an important thing to watch out for, especially when you're bringing new technology into your tech stack. You need to make sure that the data in those technologies aren't sitting in different silos as well, because you've got different departments with different data sets, you've got different tech with different data sets. And so actually it can be really difficult. So if you carry on down that road, it can be a really unusable mess, and it's super time consuming and stressful as well. So one kind of bit of advice for everyone on the call today is make sure you go back through where your data's sitting, whether it's on a technology or departmentally, and make sure there's one single source of truth for all of that data that the business collects, so that you can make sure you're using it as effectively as possible.
Absolutely. You mentioned tech at this point. Maybe a nice moment to talk about that. So, yeah, you're seeing the fly that's going around. What kind of tech do we have as event planners and event marketers to really measure the data that we need? What sources, what would an event manager look for, or event marketer look for at this point?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think what I see is there's not one tool that does the job. There's like always a connection of, I would say, 4 to 5 different tools. And I think what you have to really commit on is what's the one tool that we trust the most? Like, do we want the data sit in the CRM system so that it's connected to like sales data, other marketing data, etc., or do we want to have the data in a event management platform? Because I know, like, we're talking about building features, measuring so many data points, right? But we also talk about, hey, is it really Sweap where the data sits in the end, where it like shows the impact, or do we have to build the connection to the proper CRM system and just push the data through because people don't want to look into Sweap to really learn about the data, to really take action on the data? So I think it's a mix of tool that you need, and like it's good to like only focus on 2 or 3 places where you collect the data. So like if you have an event management platform, make sure that you can like get most out of it, but then like make sure that you have another platform and the data is pushed through to a platform where you really take action on the data. And this is not necessarily be the event management platform, to be honest.
Chloe, I'm sure you have an opinion on this.
Yeah, I do, of course. So if you don't mind, guys, I'm going to split this up into kind of 3 different types of data that everybody on this call should be collecting, and then kind of maybe some of the tools that will support the collection of that data. And this is something that Flo and I did have a chat about last week, because it's super important, and one of them in particular often gets left behind. So the first type of data that everybody should be collecting is demographic data, and most of you probably already do. So this is who your attendees are, their job titles, their company names, their location. And this kind of stuff is generally collected pre-event. So probably you'll have this in your CRM or your registration tech platform. So that's the demographic data, which is most common, I think, with event planners. Mm-hmm. The next type of event data that everyone should be collecting is engagement data. So this has become much more common post-pandemic because of the acceleration of the digital transformation. But this engagement data tells us what people did at an event. So where they went, who they visited, how they engaged, what sessions they attended. This is typically much more easy to create if you're doing to collect if you're on a virtual platform, of course, because engagement data is kind of built into virtual platforms. But we're starting to see technology crop up in the in-person events world that kind of measures how long somebody stood at a booth for, or how many times they walked past a particular booth in a trade show. So there is a tool out there that you can use to kind of measure that engagement data in person. So you've got demographic data, engagement data, which I'm sure most of you know. And then the third one is often the missing link. And this is what is super important to us in particular at Explori, but should probably be important to everybody. This is sentiment data. Mm-hmm. So the sentiment data is the type of data that tells us why people did what they did. And this is generally collected in a post-show or on-site survey. And it is generally the final piece of the puzzle and by far the most important data set, because it gives light to true event impact analytics in real time. So it tells us NPS, customer satisfaction, brand loyalty, value for time, and it's obtained from your attendees when they are the most engaged. And it gives you a level of insight that you can't gain through analysis of demographic or engagement data alone. So sentiment data is that real-time analysis that allows you to understand the impact of your event without having to attribute it to a sale that's made 2 years down the line. Sentiment data is really the key to qualifying event impact using behavioral and attitudinal impact scores. So sentiment data can understand an intent to purchase if your attendees are customers, or sentiment data can help you understand how an employee feels about your organization in the moment, which can again help you kind of determine your employee engagement strategy. So the sentiment data is really important, and the 3 together, demographic, engagement, sentiment, are what every single event planner should be using to truly collect the right insights as per their event. And so anything from CRM for engagement, CRM is for your demographic data. You've got kind of your tracking tools for your engagement data, and then you've got things like surveys and equivalent tools like that for your sentiment data, which is important. And also what our attendees think and feel is absolutely critical to the performance of our events, because if you leave it to just attendee numbers or revenue generated, you're being reactive, because you don't start to change things until the attendee numbers start dropping or until you start losing revenue. And then you panic and think, oh my goodness, something's going wrong. We're not delivering this event properly. How can we change it? But my argument would be you're too late at that point. You kind of already missed the boat. Whereas if you're tracking your sentiment data, you can be ahead of the curve and you can understand the minds and the thoughts of your attendees before they start to not come anymore, so that you can change things proactively. And that, I think, is kind of the missing link to a lot of the things that we do within event measurement.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Chloe, you mentioned buyer intent at this point, or in general, the topic of intent at this point. And I think this is something that's becoming more and more clear in the marketing world, that you can collect leads over leads. You can have databases with, excuse me, with so many contacts. Sorry. So many contacts inside, but at the end of the day, if you can't determine what their intent is to actually really convert to a customer, it's useless. And events are such a great way in this sense to really understand what is the intent, where in the funnel are the people, where in the funnel are your leads, and depending on the topic, how generalized, how specific the topic of an event is, it's so much easier to understand the actual intent of the lead. I mean, I come from content marketing, and this is basically something that's been very present in the world of content marketing. How specific is your content? This shows gives us a little bit more information about the actual intent of the lead. But yeah, events, I think this is a totally new world and gives us so many new options to really determine where is this lead currently in the funnel.
And I think we also need to bear in mind, we're all guilty of it. We go to an event and we'll let an exhibitor scan our badge, even though we've got absolutely no intention of ever engaging with them after the event. But we do it because we're polite or because we're there, so we might as well. And so actually it can make the metric of how many leads generated quite inaccurate, because that doesn't mean that those people actually want to buy from you just because you managed to scan their barcode as they walk past your stand. So it's, yeah, exactly as you say, Ollie, it's about understanding the intent of those that are engaging with you. And once you understand that, you've absolutely cracked it, and you will see your event program develop tenfold because you're just understanding those that are attending. And that for me is so important. And again, important for us as an industry to really be able to leverage if we really want to make sure we stay relevant. And we are relevant. We just need to prove that we are. And so that, again, comes back to that.
Oh yeah, 100%. And what I would say, and maybe I hope we can do this. Maybe you could give some advice on how all the three parts can be connected to marketing and sales teams to really help them in terms, because what I always see is if you only measure demographic data and you try to you give the demographic data to your sales team, they do cold outreach at the end of the day. As you said, badge scan, this is stupid metrics to measure because it tells you nothing. It gives you a list of cold leads at the end, and you don't know, maybe 10 of them are hot leads, I don't know, but most of them might be cold leads. But if you use engagement data, for example, if you can tell your sales team, hey, look, your specific contact engaged with this content piece or in this session, he asked this question in the Q&A, and this was the answer. Maybe you can kind of follow up, deep dive into it, and then you can give them the tool that they need to really figure out, hey, where on the intent level are they, and how can I bring them down the funnel again? How can I really talk to them in a way that they I'm getting closer to the goal of turning them into a customer? So using the data is if you only use demographic data, you will never have the impact that you have if you use engagement data. And to be honest, sentiment data is this is the new game for me. I would say this is really something that we don't use the potential at all yet. But this is so cool because they're able to show even more what I talked about, kind of, hey, yeah, no, we had that impact on brand recognition, on brand awareness 12 months ago, and maybe this is the reason why sales went up 10% in Q4, something like that, right? So if you connect the data point, that totally makes sense. And engagement data is something if you route engagement data through to the sales team, to the sales department, they can really use it and getting into the mode of personalize the outreach, really close to the audience, follow up in a way that you never do if you don't have the data. And the same thing for marketing teams. If you have the engagement data and you track them from a different perspective, not from like the personal perspective, but from the audience perspective, kind of, hey, look, they engaged with this topic even more than with the other topic. Maybe we should follow up. We should like create another follow-up event. We should create a podcast series about and talking exactly about this pain point that we figured out people are asking for in the sessions. So again, this engagement data is a step. And maybe you could jump in, Chloe, because you're the expert, and tell a bit more about the sentiment data that can be used.
So I think when it comes to marketing and sales teams, the reason why sentiment data absolutely elevates your entire understanding of your potential customers and your attendees is it really removes that time wasting piece, because so many sales and marketing teams find that they are putting in time into not just creating content and cold calls and following up with people who actually may have walked past the stand, may have attended the event, may have stayed on that virtual session for half an hour. But again, if you don't know what they're thinking and how they intend to act afterwards, you could just be chasing a cold lead, or somebody who's actually a competitor who wanted to check out your content session because they wanted to take some tips away, or somebody who's looking to change careers, who's wanting to move into whatever topic it was you're talking about. So the thing with sentiment data is, for me, it makes your internal resources as efficient and productive as possible, because it takes away all that stuff on the side that doesn't really mean anything, and it shaves away all that time wasting outreach to those people that actually aren't that bothered, aren't invested in your brand, don't want to know more. And that's why sentiment data for me is the absolute cherry on the top. And we do talk about engagement data a lot. That has come from the pandemic. It is important, but controversially, I don't think it's enough. Because frankly, I have seen many people attending a virtual session who switch off their camera, and then they go to the shop or go for a walk and then come back an hour later and leave the call. And what that tells us is that we have, again, inaccurate numbers. We can't really understand, was that person engaged? Did they want to know more? What did they learn? What are they going to do with that information? And so that's why sentiment, it really allows you to use your resources effectively. It really allows you to know your customers and your attendees as best you possibly can. Until there's a way that we can read people's minds, sentiment data is the only way that we can truly understand how to use our resources most effectively post-event. And so that's why, for me, it's absolutely critical. And I can't believe more of us aren't doing it, but I think we're going that way. But again, for the industry, we need to be doing it more. And marketing sales teams, they're going to maximize their resource and their bandwidth if they're using sentiment data to truly understand their attendees.
Back to sales and marketing in this sense. So we as marketers maybe can really work with this word sentiment data, and I think that what you just explained, we somehow understand this. It is in our nature as marketers, and the way we deal with data, we understand it. How can this be communicated on a regular basis to the sales teams, and how what do we as marketers need to do to educate possibly and to really get this idea out there and this importance, and really then be able to explain that the 10K investment that we had in this event and only 5K actually showed at the end with sales, how does this communication work between the marketing teams and the sales teams really effectively?
So I think you need to have a proper reporting system in place. I think you need to, again, agree on those objectives, make sure that once a show comes to a close and you've got your demographic, your engagement, and your sentiment data, you're pulling that together into a visual story, and you're using dashboards and you're using metrics and you're using analytics to explain, this is what we've seen and this is what we would recommend our sales teams do in order to make sure we really maximize this kind of warm lead time post-event. So that's one way, is about telling the story and understanding your stakeholders and understanding how your sales team want to be given that information so that you can really lay it out for them in a way that serves them. There's this common misconception of the quote, speak to others as you want to be spoken to. That's not true. You speak to others as they want to be spoken to. You understand your sales teams and the way they like to communicate, and you make sure you tell the story accordingly. You tell the story of the data in the way they want to hear the story. That's one thing. Another thing that you can do, which is all about the tech again, is if you find a way to have a unique identifier for your sentiment data and you can feed that back into your CRM, then your sales teams can immediately see the sentiment, the thoughts, the feelings, the intention of those that attended an event. And this goes through from your kind of event registration platform through to your post-event feedback, through to your CRM. So it's that continuous cycle. So they can see immediately, okay, this person gave us this score in terms of intent to purchase. Let's give them a call. And then you can obviously in your CRM, you can filter out and that kind of thing. So that's a way of talking to the sales team without actually talking to the sales team. It's just using the tech. But then I think it is about telling that story, and it's about making sure you do it in the right way so that people listen and they understand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this comes down to and psychology to a point where if you can tell a salesperson how something helps them to hit their quota, that might be not necessary for them to know, right? They might don't care about this. So if you have the chance, or if you're able to tell a story that with the goal of at the end, there should be, hey, and this is how this helps you to close deals faster, to increase revenue on a deal, or to close more deals, I think you have a hard time to really engage with them in a way that is kind of what we want to call engagement between everybody's excited and running into the same direction. So I think what I would recommend is post-event, sit together as a team, take a look at the session, but not the recording, not looking again at what you just your CEO just is talking about or the guest is talking about, but go into the chat, talk about, hey, what does it tell you? Maybe a salesperson said, interesting, he's connected to this person and he was asking the question, maybe I can do an intro or something like that. And you help them to understand, hey, this is why we do this. And this is when we sit together and we help you to understand the data that we see in a way that you can use in your daily business, then you will win. Then they will kind of at the end, hopefully sales team is sitting next morning, waiting for you guys coming in and please tell us what was happening last night during the event. But it needs to be connected to that goal of closing revenue.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, that is obviously, as we know, the objective of many sales teams. But I also think the way that we present the data as marketing and event teams is critical as well, because we need to think there's no point going to a sales team and giving them a 10,000 row spreadsheet and saying, here you go, here's the data we found from the last event we did. I'll leave it up to you to interpret it. Because absolutely, some people in your organization will want that. You might have operations leads who like to have that influx of data so that they can interpret it themselves. But what you really should be taking to those sales team meetings is 3 headlines so that you can absolutely dig deeper into it and make sure they know there is much more data where this came from, but this is the overall headlines. Relate it to personas. Say this persona group at this event thought that XYZ and they want XYZ as next steps, and this is what the sales team should do 1, 2, 3. So it's setting it out really clearly. That's the key thing, because I've seen with certain event organizers that they tend to just literally throw a spreadsheet to their sales team and say, here you go, this is the data we collected. A sales team member is not going to interpret that data, and effectively it goes back to what we said at the beginning. There's loads of data, but if you don't know how to deal with it, it's totally useless. And so that's an example of what you shouldn't do. You should go with a story, like I said before, story to tell, key headlines, key ways to follow up, and then work out next steps. Ask the sales team, what do you think about that? Is that what you were expecting? What are we going to do from here? How are we going to reach out to these groups that we've really highlighted, are really keen to know more about the product that we're trying to display to them? So next steps, document things, tell the story in the way they want to hear the story, and make sure that you're using headlines and almost like a buffet at a restaurant. You want to have all the options, but really they're probably only going to pick the chips, the broccoli, and maybe some cheese sauce. So how do we kind of put those in front of them? That's how we should really view it.
Absolutely. I think communication is once again key in this case. I mean, really sitting down after an event and speaking about what was gathered, what data was gathered, that's the one thing. And maybe detaching this whole idea of sales, marketing a little bit, talking more in terms of revenue team, talking more in terms of we're all in one boat, because that takes away this tension that there might be of people in one or the other department saying that there's no base for collaboration when it comes to events and so on. So absolutely agree with you, Chloe, also with you, Flor. And I really hope that maybe after the session, our participants will really get around the table with the sales teams and then talk about their event data. So that's fantastic.
Can I also just really quickly, I'm so sorry to jump in, can I just add on that as well? What I think organizations should be doing if they really want their marketing and sales teams to be working collaboratively in this space is set up large team bonuses or KPIs that are bonus led or commission based, because actually in a lot of marketing cases, it's a sort of, why should I help the sales team put more leads through the funnel when I'm not getting anything to show for it? And that's a mistake that big businesses make all the time, right? They will give bonuses out to salespeople willy-nilly, and then they forget the marketing folk that actually did a large part of the lead generation journey to get there. Mm-hmm. So if I were a organization leader, I would say, right, I'm going to bring together those two teams, make sure they share objectives, and make sure they're all bonused accordingly if those leads come in. So that's another thing I think that's important.
Yeah, shared goals, shared KPIs, huge topic in the events world, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that was the last thing I would say is, if you, coming back to what we talked at the very beginning, if you want to secure your job, if you want to secure your budget, make sure that the VP of sales is fighting for your budget. If you're able to do that, there is no way that your budget gets cut. If you have the VP of sales telling the leadership team, the board members, hey guys, please do everything, but don't cut events because you need it to reach my numbers, this is how you win.
Absolutely. Perfect, guys. So we're close to the end of the session. I've just checked the Q&A and it has been used, which is fantastic. And we have 2 questions from the audience. And I'm just going to shoot away and hope that you guys have an answer. So first one I have here is, do you have any tips on how to get accurate data from the sentiment analysis? How do you ensure that people give a true reassemblance of their experience? Since we all know what people say and answer versus what they experience can be quite different. Tricky one, and I'm going to shoot it first into your direction, Chloe, as you brought up the topic of sentiment data.
Yes.
The question was asked by Marian. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Marian, thank you.
Marine. It might be Marine. Yes. So how to get accurate data. So I think the first thing, there is a common misconception, and I get asked this question all the time as kind of event feedback is our bread and butter, is don't people only give feedback if they're either really happy or really sad? And that's actually not the case, because what we found over our years and years and years of doing this is actually the average tends to really sit in the middle, which shows, first of all, that people are absolutely telling us how they feel. So that's important. But there's other ways you can do it. You could anonymize feedback, so that if you've got a huge event with 10,000 attendees and make the feedback anonymous, you can still use that to actually measure the success or performance of your event, but you don't need to drill down into who actually said what. So that's one way that you can do it. I think if you're using a tool, a faceless tool, you're more likely to get accurate results because people don't feel like they're upsetting anybody. Now, if I am a person out on the floor and I go up to somebody and say, oh, what did you think of this event, with a badge saying, I run this event in big letters on my top, you're probably not going to tell me exactly what you really thought, just in case it might offend me. Whereas if you're using a tool to do it, that tool becomes an objective bystander, and it's just extracting that information and then pushing it out, obviously, to your dashboards or to your teams. So I think there's multiple ways of doing it, but I would say use a tool to do it, automate your questions and your responses into actionable metrics, and use anonymization if you need to. I mean, there's absolutely no problem with doing that. It still measures and tracks your event performance accurately. So that would be my advice.
Fantastic. Flor.
Well, yeah. Hard question for me, to be honest, but I think what I would do is not put the event organizer in the position to collect the feedback. Use a different department. So use your sales team as observers. Ask the sales team to, hey, if you follow up after the event and you have a call with them, or you have some kind of engagement with them, make sure that you like get some of the feedback that you might need, but from a different channel. Because I think like I run an event, and then my sales person speaks to the customer, and then maybe the customer or the prospect is like more into the position of saying, hey, yeah, that was quite cool, but I only had 20 minutes because then I had to pick up my daughter from school or something like that. And then you get like this feedback of like really from face-to-face feedback.
I'm so sorry. Can I just add one quick thing as well? I think the important thing is that as event organizers, we need to demonstrate we're actually doing something with the feedback we're taking. Mm-hmm. So I think the best way to ensure you're getting accurate feedback is to act on it. And that's what we call the feedback loop. So it's all well and good kind of taking feedback and then doing nothing with it. If you take feedback and you really learn from it, and then you action it for the following edition of the event, then people will start to see that you're doing something with the feedback they're giving you, and they're more likely to give you more and for it to be more accurate because they're seeing changes being made. So that's another key thing I think I'd add to that.
Would you go as far as to even like collect the feedback and present it in some content graphical way? Say, look, this is what we heard, this is what we did. Is this something how far we should go with the feedback, or just...
Absolutely, yes. I would absolutely do that. I think that is really key to showing your attendees you are important to us. Mm-hmm. We design our event strategy based on what you need and what you're telling us, because to be totally honest, if you're going to spend years and years collecting feedback from attendees and don't do anything with it, you're going to lose all credibility, and people are just going to stop giving it to you, and people are going to stop having affinity with your event. So it's really key that you do something with it.
Fantastic. We've got time for one more question, also from the Q&A. I've heard ideas about eye tracking and other neuromarketing approaches. Chloe just mentioned real-time data to improve quality and actionability of your data. Is this the future, or how else should or can technology improve change in the future to nail the numbers in all three categories?
Who's going first? Flo, did you want to go first? Because I keep stealing the first slot, so I feel like I need to handle it.
It's all good. This is your stage, Chloe. I would say 100% yes. I don't have the answer to how that will look like in the future, because to be honest, we're focusing on something different here at Sweap. Like in 5 years from now, the technology that we have, that we see now with other folks developing, really have the capacity to connect the data dots and to really help us to understand the data in a better way and help us to really use the data, take action on it. And I don't know if it will be eye tracking or if there's something different. There's always like the data privacy part coming in, but there will be huge improvements on that as well, because now we kind of know what's possible in a virtual event, and we don't want to like miss the data for in person. I'm quite sure that like somebody will come up with a solution for it.
Okay, so I've actually been talking to some people about this lately, and I think it's super cool, the technology that does the eye tracking and the neurological kind of assessment of people in real time. However, do I think it's the future? Probably not. There's two reasons to that. First of all, I think sentiment data actually long-term is much more cost-effective and an easier way, and more important, to measure your audience perception. But also, I don't see this technology ever being inexpensive. So I think some big events will absolutely have it, for sure. And I think they can afford it. It's going to be an investment. But do I think 10, 20, 30 years down the line, small conferences will be paying big money for eye tracking devices? Probably not, because I think they'll probably find they can get better data elsewhere. However, if you want an absolutely fully joined up data approach as real time as possible, yes, you do want the demographic, the engagement, and the sentiment, and that will require something like this. But I think sentiment is more important, and again, probably easier to use. So I don't think eye tracking is necessarily the future, but I think it will become more common. That's my thoughts.
Fantastic. I love it. We're finishing this session with two different opinions. That's always great. More to talk about down the line. Fantastic. Guys, we've basically reached the end. We've gone on a journey, I'd say. I mean, we started with the Armageddon scenario of events becoming obsolete if we're not careful, to strategic solutions, tips and tricks for all event marketers and also salespeople, definitely out there to really make the best of the data. And we've learned different types of data, how it can be used, and so on. So for me personally, I'm leaving the session with more wisdom than I had before, that's for sure. And I really hope that this is the case for our viewers as well. Guys, any last words you want to share with the community before I say goodbye to you?
Just thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun. And I just want to leave with one final line, which is, I think, really important, that we know that creating events is an art, but measuring them and demonstrating their impact is what I would like to call a science. So let's make sure that we are making ourselves as indispensable as possible going forwards.
Lovely. Flo?
I shut up now. This is nothing that I would like. Perfect ending.
Perfect
Done.
ending. Thank
Oh,
you, Chloe. Very wise words.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
So, Chloe and Florian can be found on LinkedIn if anyone is interested in following them and staying in touch. There's a lot going on in their profiles. Personal recommendation from me. Look for the guys. You find them, the links on the registration page and on the virtual event platform that you're just visiting. Thank you very much. I wish both of you a lovely rest of your day. Enjoy. And I'm sure we're going to see both of you on this show very soon again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
So here we go. You're with me again. Great. I really hope you enjoyed this. I definitely did. 2 points. How are we continuing? There will be a November session at the end of November, more or less the same date as we have now in October. We don't have it nailed down yet when it comes to the speaker, so just give it a few more days. You'll be receiving the invitation either via our Slack community or via email as usual. We'd love to see you back again. That's point number 1. And point number 2 is join our community if you haven't then. As I already mentioned at the beginning of the session, there's a lot going on and we'd love to have you. We're growing and we're at the beginning, but I really hope we can offer you loads of value throughout the way. So this was it. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you very much and see you on the next session. Goodbye.